Okay, so today is what is this? December the 10th, right?
Yes, I think so. I
2022.
think so.
Um, so I got that. We're at my grandpa's house. Grandpa is Bill Fowler,
Known as
William.
William N. Fowler, as opposed to you being William F. Fowler. Oh, yes, no, you're William. You William F. Vaughn.
I'm the Vaughn side.
Yeah, you got a different name when you were born by your mother, not by your grandmother.
Exactly. Um, so what day were you born? What's your birth date?
December 5, 1943.
Been around here for a while.
Yep.
And I'm Will Vaughn, the interviewer, and the camera operator is this really nifty picture stand that we rigged up. So what war and which branch of the military were you in?
I was during the Vietnam War, and I was in the Army,
What was your rank there?
captain.
You're a captain.
I was a captain when I went in, and I was a captain when I went out.
And you served, where'd you serve?
I served in, well, the way it was, I had to go to about 3 or 4 places. I was, when I went in the Army, the Vietnam War was at its height, I would say. It was going hot and heavy. And they needed everybody they could. And we had a draft, and a lot of people don't even know what a draft is. And at the time of the draft, or at the time of the beginning of the war, I was in law school. And we were, as a law school student, or any college student, was entitled to a deferment. Not, you couldn't get out of the Army altogether, you were just deferred while you were in school at that time. So I was at LSU in law school, and that was delayed as long as I was in school. There were several changes in the course of what would keep you delayed. Toward the end of my schooling, they made it so that if you were married, they couldn't draft you.
Okay.
And yeah, but then it got worse or better depending on what your viewpoint was. And at the end of my school, when I finally got out of school, and it was like in the last year, they had the lottery, and I got a number that meant, I don't even know, the lottery came after I got out of the service. I think that's what happened. But anyway, it didn't play a part in anything I did. I do know that right before I got out of school, though, they changed the rules, and they said any potential soldier that had a deferment from the military would not be drafted if he had a child. I didn't have a child, and I didn't have time to make one. So I had to seek alternative ways to get into the military, other than being drafted.
Right, because you were not drafted because of.
No, I didn't want to be drafted.
You didn't want to be drafted, exactly.
Well, who wants to be drafted?
Nobody.
You've been drafted and be sent to Vietnam and carry a gun. I mean, I really didn't want to do that. At the same time, I felt that it was everybody's duty to serve in the military if that was the law, and that
Right.
was the law. And I wasn't gonna. There were some of my contemporaries who went to all kind of means. They went to Canada. They did there were all kind of people. There were all kind of methods of avoiding the draft. I didn't do that, but I did call my uncle, who was on the draft board, probably a month or so before I got out of law school, and asked him what my chances were of being drafted. This is kind of an aside, and I told him I made sure, and he was that kind of guy too, that I wasn't trying to avoid the draft. I just wanted to know what my chances were.
What the probability was you were realistically going to draft.
I guess maybe by then, I don't know. Maybe I had a lottery number. I don't recall. Nevertheless, he told me it was 100%.
Mm-hmm.
So then I had to really scramble to do something else. I didn't want to carry a gun. If I had to carry a gun, I would have. But it just so happened, I don't know how this happened either. There was a JAG officer who was out of New Orleans, who was a lawyer from Louisiana, but he was from New Orleans. I don't know how he got my name. I happened to be at the top of my class. I don't want to misstate anything. I was number 2 in my class, not number 1. When I say top of the class, I was
right.
Number 2 in the class, which I guess he had information. I guess the deans from the law schools told.
Somebody must have said something
me.
To somebody.
It was very difficult. Every lawyer in the United States wanted to get into JAG, as opposed to carrying a gun. I mean, that makes sense.
That makes a lot of sense. Yeah.
Right.
I mean, you're going to school for it already.
Yeah.
So.
I mean, you practice law. You're ready to go practice law, and you don't want to be losing 4 years. Anyway, that was a requirement. If you went into JAG, they were going to take 4 years. That was a commitment. If you were drafted, that commitment, it wasn't a commitment, the requirement was 2 years.
Right.
But anyway, the guy comes up to LSU. I remember he later on clerked in the Supreme Court. And yeah, his name was Souter, I remember that. And I think he may have become the clerk of the Supreme Court. There's a difference. He didn't clerk. Yeah, I think he became the clerk for the Supreme Court. Kind of like the clerk of court down here, as opposed to the clerk for a judge.
Right, exactly.
You have both of those here in Baton Rouge. And he suggested that I go into JAG, and you had to go through a lot of rigmarole to do that. You had to give all this paper, and you had to get all these recommendations from the school, and what have you. And make a long story short, that was in 1972. I got a letter saying I was accepted, and we were happy. Charlotte and I were. You weren't born yet. Your sisters weren't born yet. And so from my first duty station was Fort Lee, Virginia, where they were teaching me how to become a soldier. Mm-hmm. Because I had no military experience at all.
Right.
I had to learn how to salute. I'm serious. Really. Why they wanted me to salute, whom to salute, and what happened. All the military rigmarole. Most of the JAG officers, I'd say probably 80% of them, were ex-ROTC, had some kind of military. They had prepared for the service.
Right.
Everybody knew there was a war going on, and they had prepared for military service through ROTC. LSU had. I could have done it, but at the time that would have worked for me. I was deferred because they were giving the deferment to people in school, and I was in school, and I was going to be in school for 4 years, 7 years, and so I didn't really think about it until they changed the rule first that you had to be married, and I was married, so I was safe there from the draft.
Right.
And then right before they changed it to have this baby thing, and that made it impossible.
Exactly.
So that's when I looked to get into the service. And my uncle, once he told me that it was 100% certain that I would be drafted, then I talked to the guy in New Orleans, so he talked to me. He came up to LSU. He came to the law school, gave a lecture, was trying to recruit me. And I talked to your grandmother, and we decided that was our best course of action. We went to Fort Lee, Virginia, and that's where I learned how to become a soldier. Learned how to carry guns. We had to go through typical Army training. We had to go through the obstacle course, all the climbing under machine gun bullets. I remember a scary thing was climbing under barbed wire with bullets flying. They were tracers flying over your head. I don't know if they were real bullets. I was really concerned, Will, that it was nighttime, but we did it during daytime and nighttime, but the nighttime exercise, I was concerned there might be some snakes down there, and would I stand up or would I not? Nobody told you what to do in that case.
Right.
But anyway, I made it through that. And then you had the other thing, climbing the walls and all the stuff that you see on these military shows where you get, the JAG took the head of JAG took the position that we were soldiers first and we were lawyers second. So we had to do the same.
Right. You got to know the basic stuff of it.
Well, it was more than basic. We had to go into the gas chamber with a gas mask, take our gas mask off. I didn't like that.
It doesn't sound very pleasant.
No, because you breathe in chlorine or whatever they have in there, but you just don't breathe it in very long. You have to, as I remember, you have to take off your gas mask, give them you had a number, your ID number, it wasn't your social security number. Your military number, you had to give them that and your name and your rank and something else, just long enough to get enough where you had to breathe. You couldn't just go in there and hold your breath. We had morning exercises, afternoon marches. We had the typical military stuff. That's what you did at Fort Lee. You learned how to become a soldier. From there, we went to Charlottesville, Virginia, where at the university, there was a JAG school at the University of Virginia. There I learned how to become a military lawyer, which was to learn the Uniform Code of Military Justice. And we were there, I think, for 4 months. I went there, I don't know, maybe 3 months, 4 months, somewhere there. We were there from the fall of 72 to Christmas of 72 or January of 73. And then I went to my first duty station, which was Fort Lee, Virginia. When we were in Virginia, we were stationed in Fort Lee. I'm confusing the whole thing. That's when we would learn. That's when I was
That's
learning.
where you were learning.
Become a soldier.
Right, how to become a soldier.
Then we went to Fort Leonard. Then my first duty station, which was Fort Leonard Wood, Missouri.
Right.
And I was there for about 8 months. And then one day I got a phone call, and I was out. I don't know whether I was out on a case or something. I don't remember what I was doing. And I came back and I said to the office, they told me that the office of Judge Advocate General had called. They wanted to talk to me. Since nobody was there, I went home to our house at
Fort Leonard.
Fort Leonard Wood, yeah,
Right.
thank you. Talked to your grandmother, and I'm going to Vietnam. Everybody was going to Vietnam. I mean, that was, they just needed everybody going to Vietnam. So I told her, start packing, we're going to Vietnam. When I got back to the office where I worked in Fort Leonard Wood, they told me I was not going to Vietnam, but that I was going to Okinawa. Quite frankly, I had no idea where Okinawa was. I mean, I had an idea, but not
General
precise.
idea.
Yeah, not
Right.
a precise idea. I came home again. Well, I guess at the end of my duty day, and we had to look at an atlas to find where it was. Your grandmother and I, and we had no choice, but we were happy about it. The only choice we had, I could have said, I don't want to give you 4 years. I could have done that, because that's voluntary. 2 years were compulsory.
2 years, right. 2 years were required, the other 2.
4 years, if you want to get into JAG, the way I was, what was called a direct commission. You had no military experience. We're going to take you, but in return, you got to give us an extra 2 years. Okay. Well, anyway, I agreed to it, and we went to Okinawa. I was there then from would have been the mid-73, because I'd been there from January till about August. Yeah, that's what it was. August, June, July, August, somewhere along in there, when I went to Okinawa, and we were there for the rest of my commitment until my son was born, your namesake Will, the other namesake. And I had to stay an extra month or 2 because you had to be there. The military required that if you bring a dependent with you, it, I guess nowadays the proper pronoun is it or whatever. I don't know what the proper pronoun is.
I know my guess is as good as yours.
Well, we had a boy, and that wasn't dependent on pronouns. It was just if you had any child, that child had to be 6 months or 6 months old before they would transport him back on an airplane.
Okay.
So I had to stay an extra month or 2, which really hurt me because we were ready to go home. I mean, this extra month or 2.
At that point, I guess you'd been there 4 years at that point then.
Yeah,
right?
I had not left that rock. We called it the rock. Well, I had not left the rock. Now, Nana had come home one time you had had a sister. We had a sister for you that she brought home in the middle of my tour over there, but we couldn't afford for both of us to fly back. We had to pay for that.
Right, that was not on the Army's
not on the government tab. So somewhere in the middle of my tour, she had gone home. I hadn't been home. I was ready to go, but we had to wait the extra month. It wasn't a major deal, but I'd had a major court-martial right before that, though, maybe a month before, 2 months before, where the island almost, not almost, the portions of the island did go in a riot because I had represented a soldier who allegedly raped an Okinawan, a young girl, and you defended who they gave you, and they
right,
gave me
that's all
this
you
guy.
could do.
I remember the guy's name was Henry. His last name was Henry. And he was acquitted. And the people on Okinawa were not happy with that. They thought it was all set up and what have you. And so there was a semi-riot. They didn't use force. I think they burned some buildings but no physical violence that I remember.
Right. Well, I guess they probably knew better considering.
No, we had the force.
Right,
we could
exactly.
put them down. Yeah, but they all came to the courthouse and they showed their force.
Right.
That's the last thing I did over there. And so that came, and then I had to wait the extra month or 2. And they made me the head of the island, my commander, who happened to be from Louisiana, might have been from LSU, General Smith, required that I take this guy to the airport and get him off the island because they were all scared of it. And
they were thinking he was going to get hurt.
Yeah, right. So there was a big military Air Force base on Okinawa at the time, which was also a source of very ill feeling between the Okinawans and the military. But they just didn't want them there. You know, they didn't want to, and especially the Air Force Base, because it flew all the support for Vietnam. All the B-52s flew out of there, and then the spy planes flew out of there. You could hear them in the mornings when they took off. The big, we refer to them as Habu, which was a local snake. A fantastic looking plane. They still have it. I know it was the last time I saw a picture of it. It was a SR-71. I remember it vividly. It was fantastic for the time.
Right.
And it wouldn't compare with anything we have now. But it was a big, loud plane. You could hear it all over the island, I think. Not that the island was that big.
Still impressive nonetheless.
It was. If you saw it now, it's in. You can see it now. It may
I know
be.
they have them in museums.
Yeah, I was going to say that probably. No, it wouldn't be in the New Orleans Museum, but it's in other museums. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know how I got on that, but that was. I had to wait on Henry to leave. No, I had to take him to the airport. I had to wait on Lacey. Was it Will? Lacey was born when we went there. So Natasha was born after. Must have been your brother, Will. I'm not your brother. Your uncle. I keep getting y'all confused.
Well, to be fair, we're named the same.
That's
so.
the problem.
Yeah.
Everybody.
It does make it confusing even for me if I don't catch it right.
And we have to refer to Big Will, Little Phil, Will, or me, Opa. So it makes it really. That part becomes difficult. But that's our fault. I mean, we could have done that differently. We should have thought of that. So I got off the island. My military experience on Okinawa was all with courts-martials. That's all I did. The different jobs you could have as a lawyer. You know, you just like in any law office, you could be in charge of what we call military affairs. That's handling negotiations between the command and the local people, between the general there, who was General Smith, and the government of the Ryukyu Islands. That's what it was called, GRI. That's what Okinawa was called.
Right.
And they had a dual system of government where the army ruled the island, but the government of the Ryukyu Islands, which was Okinawa, ruled by Okinawans, they had some authority. I won't say that it still had to be approved by the army. We still owned it as a result of World War II.
Exactly.
And before I forgot to mention that. Before I came back in July, I remember I came back like in September, I think. August, September. In July of '72, we gave the island back. So they had full autonomy. And of course that's...
I guess y'all... Is that whenever they pulled out? Or no?
No, we pulled out.
Right.
I mean, we pulled out.
Right.
But we left the air base there. The air base is still there to this day. And it was...
it's probably the airport now, if I had to guess.
Not a civilian airport. I don't think they ever made it a civilian airport. I don't know that for sure, though.
Possibly.
It was a big airport because it had to accommodate, airplanes were going in day in, 24 hours a day to support Vietnam.
Right.
Okinawa was the support base for Vietnam. Everything that went to Vietnam, including every soldier not every that I know, most soldiers had to go through Okinawa to go to Vietnam, to be pre-processed or whatever they did to them.
I guess before they go to their final area of Vietnam or wherever they're assigned to.
And maybe get outfitted. I don't know exactly what they did. I do know that if there was a major court-martial, what we call a general court-martial, which was where, I represented one guy who could have gotten a death sentence. If there was that kind of trial, they wouldn't do that in Vietnam. They'd have to, even if the crime happened in Okinawa, in Vietnam, they had to bring him back to Okinawa.
Okinawa for it to.
And we would try him there, and we had
Right.
a judge there, and might have had more than one judge. The one judge I remember, and they'd fly in judges
Mm-hmm.
who had the authority to try that kind of cases at different levels, just like here. You got city court, and you got the downtown 19th Judicial District Court. Or in the Army, you had a special court martial and a general court martial. And a general court martial had authority to do anything, could sentence you to death. And I tried 2 or 3 cases where the death sentence was an issue, maybe more than that. No, but the only one that got the death sentence is this guy that raped this Okinawan and was acquitted. And the one that started the riots. They had to do the government. I guess the commanding general had to show something to the Okinawan that we were doing something.
Right. It wasn't just all completely biased.
Right.
Like they thought
So they
it
took
was.
him over. He left from the airport and went to Leavenworth. That's where they would be in prison. He's no longer there. They finally negotiated it down to 50 years.
Mm-hmm.
And there was another guy I tried, I defended. He raped the wives of there was a big Air Force base. Everything, I keep saying that. Everything that went on in Vietnam first came out of Okinawa. All material, trucks, what have you, medicines, everything came through there.
It was like basically a big staging base almost.
It was. That's what you couldn't keep it in Vietnam. They'd steal it or blow it up.
Exactly.
So it was all in Okinawa. It was just a hop, 1 hour, 2 hour flight to Vietnam, and they'd bring it over there. I forgot where I was with that though, but I don't know what I was talking about. You remember?
You were talking about just about like giving the death sentence and how you had a
and
few
there was
cases
a guy
with death
that
sentences.
there was a guy that I was trying. That was so funny. Nobody's really in it 'cause it's not a military thing. I tried him. He was in the special forces.
Mm-hmm.
Now those are elite ranger type.
Right, they're like
Yeah,
a lot of training.
Yeah, they like the swimmers. What do we call them?
SEALs?
Seals. Yeah, they like seals. And the first special forces group was on Okinawa. So those were the bad guys. I roomed with one when I first got there. All he wanted to do was go kill somebody. That's what he used to tell me.
I guess it's what they're trained to do. So.
That's what he was trained to do. That's it. I don't remember his name, but we lived in the BOQ. We didn't have a house. There weren't enough houses to accommodate all the officers. So I lived in I shared a BOQ with him, and all he would talk about would be, I gotta go make a hit. I gotta get out of here and make a hit. That was his words. I remember that vividly. I hope he got to make his hit.
Hopefully he got what he wanted.
Yeah, I never knew that.
I guess if he went through all that training, I'm sure that he probably.
Yeah, he knew how to make a hit.
Yeah.
Well, if you can, it's hard to describe a BOQ, but a BOQ stands for Bachelor Officers Quarters. But this one was divided into 2 sections, one for him, one for me, and the kitchen in the middle. But when I walked in, he had put up a parachute on the ceiling.
Mm-hmm.
It was draped up both sides. Everything was military. He had guns, he had knives, everything to go make his hit.
Right. He was ready to go.
Yeah. So he and I didn't visit too much. But here again, I got off track and forgot. I was talking about this guy that I tried
for the death sentence.
Yeah, right. He was this just shows you the dichotomy sometimes in life. the guy that I defended was a Mormon. He would not drink coffee or Cokes because it was against the caffeine, was against their religion.
Right.
There's some other things he wouldn't, some other weird stuff he wouldn't do. But what he had done was at night, I guess they were all at night, I don't even remember, I'm not sure that part is true, but he had raped a number of Air Force officers' wives who were, the officers were off flying missions out of the air base to Vietnam.
Right.
And when they were gone, he would go to the air base, rape their wives, and come back. And nobody really got hurt that I remember. But they didn't take that very kindly. The military did not take that very kindly. So they tried him for the death penalty. And that's what happened. When he was being tried, he confessed, the idiot confessed. He was that bad off. I guess the religion made him confess.
Maybe the religion did make him confess. Because otherwise, I guess they wouldn't really have any concrete evidence. That...
Well, they did have some evidence. They had his knife. He raped him with a knife. I mean, he used a knife as a threat. He didn't have a gun. He didn't use a gun, is what I'm saying.
Right.
And he was a good-looking guy. He was strapping, tall. He was married. He had children. And he would go out and rape these Air Force women who were also married. That's the only reason they were there. To Air Force soldiers. And we had to plead him guilty to get 50 years rather than a death sentence. He was being charged with a death sentence.
Right.
But we ended up, I tried all kind of stuff to get him off on some technicality. He confessed, so we didn't have any defense out of it. We were looking for legal technicalities. And he went to Leavenworth too.
He got 50 years, you said?
But it was by agreement then. We had to agree with the command. When I say the command, that means there's a general, there's an officer who's the head of the island. There had to be a U.S. representative who was governing the island. It was generally, as you would think of, the governor of the island. In this case, it was because of the branch of service that was in charge of the island was the Army. It was an Army general. It was General Smith. And I know he went to LSU. I don't remember.
Was he about your age?
Oh, no. He would have been old. You don't get to be a general at my age.
Yeah, I figured he probably wasn't.
No, he was not my age. He was older. And the funny thing is, this is for just not off the record, it's the general of the Marine Corps was there as well. They had a big base there. Every service was there. Just think of it as the staging place.
Right. It was it was the place. It wasn't just for the Army.
No.
Just for the Air Force. It was for everybody.
Yeah, and it was the commanding general of the Marines was from LSU too. LSU had a big military presence during the time, in the military. So the Army general and the Marine Corps general, I met them both. We had a meeting with both. Not the Air Force general. I didn't mean to say it. The Marine Corps and the Army general were from LSU. I don't know where the Air Force general was from. And they all had separate bases. We weren't all together.
Yeah, you weren't all together at one. You were just all on the same island.
We were all on the same. But the island, for whatever it's worth, at some points was, especially where we lived, was only 3 miles wide, and it was 12 miles long. So you couldn't really escape off of that island.
Right. There wasn't a lot of.
No.
Did you have any like hobbies or stuff that you did whenever you weren't, or were you pretty much like in your free time there? Or were you pretty much always working? Or?
No. We were locked out. If you're an officer in the military, especially if you're a captain, which not being the second lieutenant or first, you're in the, it's a reasonably high rank for somebody my age.
Exactly.
But it's not because of what I did. It's every lawyer, doctor, and dentist. If they were in the army, they were captains.
They just automatically went.
You went in.
Right.
You were a captain. No, what was the question?
with your, I guess now that I know you did have, I didn't know if you had free time or not. But
yeah. Oh yeah.
We did.
I played golf. They had a beautiful golf course.
Oh really?
Yeah.
That's interesting.
Yeah, real beautiful, and I'm sure it's now being used by the Japanese. They're no longer open house. They have more than one golf course there now. I saw that somewhere. But other hobbies, I don't know that I had any other. You had to engage in what they call physical PT, physical training, which was once a week. You had to go. Oh yeah, I ran a lot over there. But that I got into running because they made me do it. You had 2 weeks. Once a week you had to go through either an hour of PT or it's not physical training. It's physical. I don't remember what PT. I just told you what it stood for. P.
You said physical training.
Maybe that's what it was.
Because the only other one's physical therapy, and that's
I was trying to distinguish.
Right, it's not. Yeah.
Not physical therapy. It was physical training, and everybody had to do it. It was not just for.
It was a requirement, regardless.
For all soldiers.
It's kind of like how you had to go and do the
right.
The
you
basics
had to stay in shape.
Right. Because you had to be ready, I guess, if somehow they invaded the island or something.
Not only that, again, I can get back to this, and it was a sore spot with all JAG officers. The damn general that ruled over the lawyers in JAG, he always took the opinion, at least as long as I was there, took the position that we're soldiers first and we're JAG second. The other services weren't that way. I mean, the other branches, the other services, the doctors and the dentists and those, no, they didn't have to do that. They didn't have to go do physical training but the thing that was just most irritating thing is that their general from those professions had seen to it that the people working under the doctors and the dentists and I guess that's about it. I don't know, some other professions, they got professional pay, which was an extra little bonus. I don't remember, it was enough to irritate all the lawyers because we weren't getting it. But you see, there again, our general said, no, we don't want that. So we heard, that's what we were told.
Which is strange because, I mean, you went to school to be a doctor or a lawyer just as much as
especially as a dentist.
Right, exactly. Just as much as a dentist went to school to be a dentist, you went to school to be a lawyer.
Yeah, it was very irritating. And kept me from making that extra little bit of money. And they didn't have to do the PT. You know,
so it was a double.
It was double.
Double whammy, basically.
Yeah, we had to be regular. We were soldiers first. We had to carry guns. We had to salute. Well, of course, they had to salute too. So you didn't get out of saluting. That's for sure. We had. I don't know if the doctors and dentists had to be officers of the day. To be officers of the day, that was scary. Because that meant that you had to go up to headquarters and you were in charge of everything. You were in charge at night, 24 hours. You were the officer of the day, and if there was an attack on an island or anything, you had all these instructions and various manuals as to what to do, who to call, and you could not go.
It's a big responsibility.
Oh, it was. It scared me. Yeah. I remember it. I had that at Fort Leonard Wood too, and they had it all written out what to do if a soldier got hurt. And I mean, you had all these, just like running a city. You were the mayor of the
You were
city.
yeah, right. You were the mayor of the city, the ruler of
I
the
didn't
town.
like that. Oh, and the other thing, this was not a hobby, but in addition to trying cases, I went, and this was not peculiar to me, this was just peculiar to my position on the island. I had to go to various outlying bases. They had, training bases here and there. Even though it was small, they still had these soldiers of various services spotted around the island where, you can't learn how to do jungle fighting if you were not in the jungle.
Right.
So
they had to have some type of training in a area that wasn't.
And they had those areas,
hostile.
believe me. They had caves. They had Okinawa was the bloodiest battle during during World War II.
Mm-hmm.
More people, more soldiers got Congressional Medals of Honor on Okinawa than anywhere else during World War II.
That says something too.
Well, it says what kind of fighting was going on.
Exactly.
It was awful. But it was the last stepping stone you see before Japan.
Yeah, Imperial Japan.
Yeah.
Homeland.
And they were doing everything to protect it. There were the caves and where they would hide out and then kill themselves. There were cliffs. There was one place called Suicide Cliff, where as Americans advanced, they would jump off and kill themselves. They had that kind of mentality, and there were monuments to them when we were there. It was an experience, I'll tell you that. Mainly the hobby that we had with your grandmother, we traveled over there. I mean, we went to Japan, we went to Guam. I tried a case in Guam. She didn't go to Guam. I went to Thailand. She couldn't go to Thailand either. We flew over Vietnam, but we didn't land in Vietnam. But I stayed in Thailand for a week or so. Guam, there was some
So you got to fly around some while you were.
Oh yeah, they sent me to the Philippines to try a case.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's the same thing. It was the reverse of judges and criminals coming out of Vietnam to Okinawa to be tried. This were these other outlying islands where we had a small army presence. There wasn't a big need to be attacking the Filipinos because they weren't outside.
Yeah, exactly.
But they still committed crimes. So we'd have to go over there to try them. And I tried one or two cases in the Philippines. In Guam, I know I tried again, about one or two. Japan, I don't remember why I went to Japan. I don't. But must have not been on Nana went there, your grandmother went there too, with me to Japan. We went to Hong Kong pretty frequently to buy things, to shopping trips. Things were cheap in Hong Kong. It was a beautiful island.
At that point was Japan, because that wasn't terribly long after World War II. I mean, it was, it was a while after, but was Japan built back up at that point somewhat?
Yes.
It was.
It was. I don't remember. Remember, I don't know whether this should even be said on here, but I was born in Germany.
Mm-hmm.
During the war in Germany.
Exactly.
And I didn't leave Germany till 1955. I wasn't adopted till 1955. And during that time in Germany, it was still in ruins. I mean, it was.
It ended in what, 48, 45?
So it had about 10 years to.
So, right.
But they hadn't started, they had just begun to move rubble.
Mm-hmm.
And then it was, that was 55. It was 12 years after that, it was 72, that I was on Okinawa, and they had rebuilt Japan pretty well.
That's pretty impressive.
Huh? Yeah,
So
they
it's
had,
pretty impressive, 'cause that's
but
about
we didn't travel all over Japan. We went to Tokyo.
Mm-hmm.
That's the only place we went. I mean, it wasn't a big long trip. I think it was a week or something like that.
I guess those are the areas that weren't hit quite as hard anyway. So
Well, imagine, no.
I'm sure
you're right.
Tokyo was, but
Tokyo, and I was going to say that. We went by the Emperor's Palace. That sticks with me. And it hadn't. I couldn't see any damage. They didn't. They didn't. But I don't know. What was valuable to the Japanese and/or the American military at the time. I mean, most of the fighting in Japan ended at Okinawa. It did.
yeah,
that was it.
that was once that was done.
And the A-bombs dropped.
Yeah.
That was it.
That sealed the deal once those were dropped.
Yeah.
Then it was over with.
Yeah. They signed a surrender paper on an aircraft carrier and off the coast of Japan.
Mm-hmm.
But I wasn't there for that. I was in Germany.
Yeah, you were in Germany as a kid.
As a kid.
So, how were you treated whenever you came home? Because I know that, at the time, a lot of people were against. By the end of Vietnam, everybody pretty much hated it. So.
Yeah, they did, Will, and I can't say that I was treated badly, but I was treated much worse when I came to Ponchatoula from Germany. And I was 12 years old, and the kids in Ponchatoula didn't like Germans.
Oh yeah, because that was much closer to,
Yeah.
much closer to home, sort of with.
And I had contact with people, but when I went to Okinawa, I didn't have contact with the with the Vietnamese.
Right. It'd be the same as instead of you coming back as an adult to America where you fought for the country, it's the same as if at the same time you returned from Vietnam, you were a little Vietnamese kid in Ponchatoula. It wouldn't have been good.
And so I can remember what happened. We flew, we had Lisi with us.
Mm-hmm. Which for my
And
professor, for my professor listening, Lisi's my mom.
Oh,
which is your daughter.
Yeah, my daughter. Your mom. That's right. I forget. But I figure you can explain that. Lisi. Anyway, we had Lisi with us, and we had Will, your brother.
Mm-hmm.
No, your father.
Will, my uncle.
Huh?
Will, my uncle.
Yeah, I got that right.
Too many Wills.
Okay. That Will, he was the one we had to wait a month on.
Right.
He was born he's a Japanese. He was born right before the U.S. gave the island back to Japan.
So does that give him dual citizenship?
Yes, he's entitled to it. He has to.
Technically, he's.
Yeah, he's got a birth certificate from Japan.
That's pretty interesting. That's neat.
it. He got that. Had to have that.
Did you benefit any from the GI Bill?
No.
I don't think
No.
because we were talking about that.
I wish I had.
Mm-hmm.
It worked backwards for me. You see, I paid for law school. We worked. I worked. I had scholarships. Your grandmother worked, and we didn't go into service till afterwards. Till after we finished our education. And then when I came back, I got a job with a law firm, so I was working. So I never, and I didn't get a GI loan or VA loan. I could have got, still entitled to a VA loan, I think, but they aren't beneficial if you. All of that stuff, Will, is if you're a lawyer or a professional or something, you're making more money than they allowed to give you the benefits. I mean,
Right.
I could get a VA loan for a house, yes, but would have been the kind of house that we wouldn't have bought.
Exactly. That makes sense.
No, so I never used the VA benefits at all. I did apply. Some guy, my barber in Hammond, he told me you ought to apply for VA medical benefit, for the VA hospital or VA medical benefits. They told me no.
Had to give it a shot. Did you have any? I know you said that you had friends or people that you knew, that you'd gone to school with, or that you knew of that went over there. Did you have any friends that got drafted that you lost in the war? Like friends from back home in Ponchatoula?
Yes, but I can't remember their names. I did. Your grandmother would. She knows. I just can't remember those names. Yeah, we did.
Because I'm sure not everybody that you knew was as lucky as as you ended up being.
Well, there weren't that many people. First of all, that went to college from Ponchatoula.
That's true too.
And moreover, there weren't that many that went to LSU. If anybody went to college back then from Ponchatoula, they was going to Southeastern because of the money situation.
Yeah.
And they wouldn't have gotten the GI Bill either because you have to go to the military. You get it afterwards.
Yeah.
I guess, so forth. Yeah, I think you get it afterwards. Honey. See if she can tell you. I don't
know where.
I know we lost several of my classmates. There may be 2 or 3 or 4.
Yeah, I can imagine because, I guess, because you had all your friends, even if it wasn't people from college necessarily, there was people, I'm sure, from Ponchatoula High School or something.
Yes, that's what I'm talking about. Those people went. The people from college, I don't remember anymore, period. They could have been my next door roommate or something. But we got, your grandmother and I got married when we were both very young, so we were kind of unto ourselves. And when we came back, I was discharged in San Francisco or Oakland.
Mm-hmm.
I took an airplane, came home that same night. Once I got my pay, they gave it all to me in cash. I had that money in my pocket, and I wanted to get home.
I don't blame you. I've been the same way.
Yeah, I didn't want to stay. Well, they would have let me stay there for a night to recover from that long flight. And the 2 babies, because we had Lisi and your uncle.
Right.
But we just said, no, we're going to go ahead. It was a long, long day. 2 days, we never slept.
So whenever you got back, I guess you ended up getting a house and all that.
We came back.
Came Baton Rouge.
I had some correspondence while I was still over there from a law firm in Hammond. They wanted to hire me, even, just by mail. And I kind of halfway committed to them, but without saying 100%. But when I got back, I had several phone calls in Ponchatoula from friends I went to law school with. And said, look, I'm working here, I'm working there, we want to interview you. So I came to Baton Rouge, had several interviews in Baton Rouge, went to Shreveport, and then had several interviews in New Orleans. And this might be interesting. In the Army, I was getting paid as a captain and just paid $1,000 a month, about $1,100 or $1,000. I did that, and that was in the Army.
Mm-hmm.
Plus, I had a free house, and we had the benefit. They give you everything in the Army. I mean, if you're an officer, you get even a free lawnmower if they want.
It's pretty nice.
Not to take with you,
but
use.
Like while you were there. Yeah.
You could even go get the gas, the light bulbs, furniture. The furniture, it stays there, but anyway.
Nice nonetheless, because you don't have to worry about it.
I don't have to worry about anything. And
right.
we did do this. This is one thing I probably should have told you. We went to, there's a lot, if you keep up with the news, there's a lot going on between China and the U.S. and Taiwan, over Taiwan.
I have heard some things about that. I haven't had time to pay attention to it.
Well, it's really simple. Taiwan, there was a war between China, the Red China, and the regular China.
Mm-hmm.
Chiang Kai-shek was the ruler of China. This was before Vietnam. He was a ruler of China, and then there was Mao Zedong, who was a communist China. And the communists wanted to take over China, and they did. and they ran Chiang Kai-shek out of China, and he went to this island off of China, Taiwan. It's a beautiful island. We went over there, they had furniture made. So that was a benefit we got.
That is a
The
good
Army
benefit.
would fly us over there, and even, I think, Nana went over there too. We might have had to pay for that though. And we had all of our furniture made over there, which people would say, oh, it won't last. And we took the attitude, well, we don't have anything anyway.
Might
Even
as
if
well.
even if it lasts 2 or 3 years, it's more than we got.
Right.
And it lasted till now.
I was going to say, you still got
I
pretty
still
much
got
all of
some.
it.
No, I don't have it. The kids have it.
It's
The
dispersed.
only thing I have is that little chest in there.
Mm-hmm.
Not in here. In there.
And the one that's
It's kind of,
with the swoopy sides on it.
yeah.
Yep, I know the one.
But all the rest of it, the table in your house, the dining room table is from from Taiwan.
Mm-hmm.
It was all made by Chinese. The pitiful thing was it was made sometimes by 13, 12, 11-year-old kids that worked in
That's
factories.
just what they were doing at that point. I
Yeah.
guess I still hear some stuff. I'm sure they still do that somewhere.
I'm sure they do. They
Probably.
still do it there.
Probably, I feel like Thailand, it seems, nowadays,
We're not talking about Thailand. I don't know what goes. I never went in a factory. I went to
Right,
Thailand, but I didn't go to
buy
a
it.
factory.
You didn't go to the factory to get it, right?
No, these came from Taipei, Taiwan.
Oh, okay.
From the what you can refer to as China because they think it's China.
Mm-hmm.
Those people feel like
They feel like it still is China.
they still is China, and the red Chinese. That's where all the soreness or all the disagreement is between the United States and what was called as the red Chinese, because of the communist China. It was called the red Chinese.
Right.
That's going to blow up in your lifetime. It's going to blow up within probably the next 4 or 5 years.
I guess we'll see what happens.
Well, it's coming.
Something's gonna happen.
And that's why we almost had this thing where, who didn't, the Speaker of the House, Nancy Pelosi went to Taiwan and they didn't want her to go.
What, the Taiwanese people? Or
No, the red Chinese.
The red Chinese.
The China, what we call China
Right.
now.
It's okay.
Honey, did we have anybody from high school that you remember that got killed in Vietnam? I know we did, but I don't remember who.
There were a number of them. I
I
don't
know.
remember who either. Some of our football players, I remember, and track guys.
Well, I was a football player and track guy.
I know, and you came home alive.
Yeah, but I never carried a gun in
Yeah.
combat.
No, you didn't.
I had to carry a lot of guys that carried a gun a lot at Fort Lee,
Mm-hmm.
Virginia, when I was training to become a soldier. Never to become a soldier, in fact.
Exactly. So, in your opinion, do you think Vietnam was worth it? And what lessons can we learn from that conflict in
That's the
general?
best question you've asked me so far. In my opinion, Vietnam was not worth it at all. I didn't have that opinion at the time. I bought all the propaganda from our government that, we had to do this. The theory was, well, that if we let Vietnam, I mean, that was the theory the government was selling, our government was selling, that if we let Vietnam fall to the communists, it was North Vietnam and South Vietnam.
Mm-hmm.
We came to the aid of South Vietnam. The theory was that if we let North Vietnam take South Vietnam, then you got a communist government in that part of the world.
Mm-hmm.
That would then engender or would cause a domino effect in that part of the world where other governments
They would become communists as well.
Right. And that's what we were afraid of. Or that's what we were told would happen.
because correct me if I'm wrong, but that was Vietnam was after the Cold War, right? If I'm not mistaken,
No,
it wasn't.
no.
Because I knew that they had all the where they were afraid for the longest time,
was
especially in that point in time, they were afraid of the communist rule and all that type of stuff.
That was throughout that period. I
Right,
mean,
exactly. It was kind of all
It was,
together.
yeah, it did run because there was a Cuban Missile Crisis. That was the Cold War.
Mhm.
Then the race to the moon and all that.
There was all kind of stuff going
Yeah,
on at
but
the
it was
same
all.
time.
It still is. I mean, you don't know how close it was here recently when Nancy Pelosi went to Taiwan, Taipei. They didn't. It was on the news every night. I mean, what's going to happen? They tell her not to go. She's going anyway, and
Which I don't know why. It seems just like a
it was
recipe for disaster.
I
but
don't
hey,
know why she did
you know.
that either. But no, to answer the question, I don't think it was worth it. I mean, now everyone, including the war where my parents, where I was living in Germany, that's none of those wars have any value at all, because in the end, we now trade with Vietnam. We take vacations in Vietnam. We get all kind of stuff from Vietnam. We use them to produce and manufacture things for us. We're good buddies now.
Yeah, exactly.
And for years we've been good buddies with Germany, yet lately it's been cooled off a little bit. It's just really kind of funny how the bitterest enemies after a war turn into the best friends.